there's a lot of discussion about how do you measure the growth and the success of these kids. I'll let Katie give a little bit more background on herself, the school that she's at, but really she's spent a lot of time kind of examining these different ways of kind of accountability for kids and measuring growth and things like that. So I will turn the time over to her.
So my name is Kathleen Allison. I'm the Executive Director of iSucceed Virtual Schools. And what I'm going to talk about for this session is alternative academic measures. I was excited to hear Professor Scaffidi's presentation today because it really is synonymous with mine. Not on purpose, I've never met him before, but I really appreciated that lens and that summary, especially from the quantitative. So I do have, you guys have a copy of this in your folder. This is a QR code for the digital copy of this. And when we go through this, I'm going to give you highlights from each slide because there's a lot of information. And I purposely did that, and I have resources at the end, just because this topic is pretty robust. It's pretty hard to put in a small segment of time, and I know we're going to have a panel, and so each of those schools will be talking a little bit about what they do. But I think it highlights it nicely. Okay, so a little bit about me. 27 years in education. I'm currently the executive director. A lot of people call me Katie. Kathleen is my in trouble name, my legal name and my in trouble name from my mom. But I'm the executive director of iSucceed. I've been in this role for about 10 years, but prior to that was a teacher, department chair, held a lot of roles within the school. I do have additional expertise. So I am also on the executive committee of the Digital Learning Collaborative, which is a national group of online learning, and it's hybrid schools, it's online schools, it's district-run programs, it's supplemental online programs. And I've been serving on that for a couple of years. That's been an excellent source of information, but also tied to quality online programs. I'm also a contributor to the National Standards for Quality in Online Leadership. This particular group is actually a National Standards for Quality in Online Learning. There's several different components. There are standards of quality, some of which is tied to Cognia accreditation. So there are national standards behind this. And also, prior to working for iSucceed, I worked in a juvenile prison. So I worked for the Department of Juvenile Corrections in Idaho for 10 years, 7 years as a teacher, 3 years as a principal. So a lot of my expertise in education has been non-traditional students, a wide variety of them. And I also included my why. Here's a picture of one of our graduation ceremonies. It was the prior year. We actually got so big we had to have 2 ceremonies. But that's my why. That's why I'm here. So I know many of you in the room probably know some of this background, but just an overview in case you don't. Why do online schools exist in Idaho? Well, they've been around for 23 years, over 23 years. And when they were created, there was a need. And there still is a need, as evident by the growth in those online schools and those programs. Idaho online schools meet a variety of needs for Idaho families and communities. Since 2002, thousands of Idaho students have graduated from online schools, some of which may not have graduated without them. And if you run an online school, you've been to an online school graduation, you know that some of those students might be the first in their family to graduate with a high school diploma. And many of those online charters, and primarily this particular session, the lens is the online charters that are authorized by the Charter Commission, but we'll talk about different structures. But many of us have been around a long time. So we have a lot of history and a lot of stuff connected with that. But many of us were approved on a specific mission or specific outreach. And some of that varies depending on the online school. And also we work in connection with traditional districts. So I know that there are now districts that have online programs, but we also work with traditional districts in which some of those districts are referring students to us because they have specific needs that the students and families need to have fulfilled. And in other states, schools like ours, especially an online school that has at-risk kids, or if that's part of their mission, in other states, we might be called special purpose schools because we're serving kids maybe in a shorter term or shorter term enrollment, or transfer schools. Here in Idaho, we do have alternative schools, but there's a very strict criteria. But we have a lot of alternative students who attend regular schools. And that up there is very much synonymous with Professor Scaffidi's slides, but very relevant to what we see in Idaho. Next slide. So why are states and schools concerned with alternative academic accountability? And, this actually is a topic that has been talked about probably since ESSA. This is not a new topic. Many states are either have adopted an alternative framework or looking at alternative accountability because the measures of ESSA are not properly matched to many of the schools that are serving these populations. When looking at alternative measures, there's factors to consider. You need to have academic measures that are considering these factors because these are the type of schools and type of students that we're serving. Different school structures are important to understand. So for example, if you have an online school that is enrolling kids all year, when you measure them and how you measure them is going to be pretty important. Student mobility, Professor Scafidi talked about this. This is absolutely a thing in Idaho. We have kids that are coming back and forth, the movers, if you will. Low student engagement. So this is more connected to many of our online high schools. So the older the student, the more that we see kids come to us that are behind in credits, they're credit deficient, or they have not really been attending their traditional school. So they're coming to you already in this kind of pattern of instructional gaps. So if you're trying to look at an ISAT measure and they've been with your school for 2 months, but they were out of school for a year prior, of course that's going to show up on a standardized test. Life circumstances. I think Professor Scafidi handled this pretty well, but this is absolutely a truth for us in Idaho as well. And then of course, last one, using a single measure. Using a single measure to measure learning is not going to give you the full picture. We are human. There are a lot of things and a lot of contributions to learning. So looking at multiple measures is a much better way to look at the learning of a student, but also look at the learning that's happening in the school. So this slide is more about the first factor, the different school structures. So in Idaho, we are very blessed to have a lot of school choice options. And like I mentioned, a lot of us have been around for 2 decades. And there's reasons for that too, trying to reach certain populations. So you may have online schools in Idaho that have different missions as well. So you might have an online school that is wanting to connect with college and career. You might have an online school that their mission and outreach is more for advanced students or honor students. You might have online schools that want to offer educational experience in the short term or need to because we know that we have those gaps. There's enrollment that happens all year. There's enrollment that happens in semesters and quarters. And so a lot of those structural differences really matter when you're trying to measure schools. It's pretty difficult when you have different structures, but many of these online schools' missions happened before ESSA was out there. So this is where it becomes problematic. My mission for my school is at-risk kids and kids who need us for a short term. So an ISAT proficiency test is not going to work for that student as far as measuring their learning. They may be with us for 2 quarters and then they may go back, or they only have 2 quarters left to graduate and they're 20 years old. So they're not going to get tested anyway. So those structures are really important. I put some examples and I put the examples of the schools I knew were going to be here, but you also have district programs now that are online that are serving similar missions. And then I highlighted mine. So our structure, we are meant to be for all student populations all across Idaho. So we have a wide spectrum of programs from remediation to future ready. We have both asynchronous and synchronous options. We have traditional enrollment quarters and semesters so that we can line up with schools better. And we are an independent charter, and all that really means for us is we don't have a back office service provider. We do it ourselves, but it does mean that we have to house those type of services in-house. A little more difficult to do. It's a little bit of a moving target. This I combined all together, and I'm glad I did because Professor Scafidi went through a lot of this. And like I said, his stuff is quantitative, but I gave you an example of a picture in time with us. So this is a survey that we give to all new students and families coming in. This was Q3 of last school year. And this gives a pretty good summary of the reasons why they chose us. And those reasons can change all year, kind of vacillate back and forth, but you can see some of the top reasons there. One of the things I wanted to highlight is something Professor Scafidi said, is that sometimes they will not tell you the exact reason. It might be really personal. We've had students who've had suicide in the family. We've had students who have anxiety issues. We have students who have PTSD or trauma, and they're not going to be really forthright, and especially new students coming to the school. But often there is a significant event in which they're making this choice. And whether that they're behind or whether they are a high-performing student who had a life experience, this is why we're here and this is why we're serving these students. We also have a lot of students who have medical needs. And often with those students, especially in a small rural district, those districts have a hard time supporting those medical students or because they don't have extra teachers. Like West Ada, for example, has extra teachers that can go and check on them in the home and do all these things with a homeschool program. Many of those smaller districts cannot do that. So why does academic accountability exist? Part of this, as you heard from Professor Scafidi, was from ESSA. It was a way to measure schools, not only so that they can do continuous improvement, but an accountability measure. And we've seen this being held with charter structures as well. And the problem with this is that the minimum measures, such as ISAT proficiency and a cohort grad rate, are not very suited to the online schools, but not only online schools, but alternative schools. And traditional schools that have alternative students, not a really good match. And here's why. Those two things make assumptions. They make assumptions that the student is going to be regularly engaged in school and that the student's going to be at the same school all 4 years. That is not our reality. Any of us who run those schools, that is not our reality. So you guys already saw kind of the demographics, but this is exactly in the blue box there, at least for us. Our average enrollment is 2 to 3 terms, which is 2 3/4. So a very short time, that's our average. And like I said, some of those things are short term and some of those things are long term. So we have students who stay with us longer. Somebody mentioned something about, are those events solvable or resolvable? Sometimes they are, and so the student will go back to a traditional school if that's the issue. But some of them are not. So when it comes to medical needs, when it comes to kids who are on the autism spectrum that really do not like to interact with other people in person, but they do very, very well academically, a trauma in their family, not easily resolvable. Some of those things are not going to be easily resolvable, so they need an opportunity to be able to get the same educational interaction and instruction so they can get their diploma. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I know just looking around, many of you are familiar with the reasons why they're looking at academic accountability in different states and actually a little bit in our state as well. But ISAT proficiency, like I said, not really a great match for short-term populations. I do list elsewhere, some of our online schools, if they have students that are with them for a longer period of time. ISAT growth, that's a completely different avenue of ISATs. That can be pretty helpful. For high schools, especially online high schools that are 9 through 12, one of the things that's really, for me as an online school provider, it's really irritating to see on our school report card, we have ISAT scores that are just in 11th grade, and that being used to measure the quality of my school. It's not reflective of my school. It's just one grade, a moment in time, completely different students every year. So I would love to see something else there that is more meaningful, not only for us, but for parents and for legislators and for the public to understand. For cohort grad rate, this is also problematic. Most of the public, when you ask them about graduation rates, they think cohort grad rate is the graduation rate of the school. It is not. So what cohort grad rate is, by definition, is a measure that's taken at one time during the year, and it's measuring how many of the students who are currently enrolled at that school will graduate in 4 years or have graduated in 4 years. But that student may have gone to 3 other schools prior. So if they're behind, that accountability sticks with the school they're currently enrolled in. So the 3 other schools that that student went to have 0 accountability for that kid's graduation. So it's problematic. But it works really well if the kid's been there all 4 years, because of course, that was the school that that student went to. So here's some solutions, and some of these solutions I want to call out a little bit. When I saw Chairman Reed come in, I said, you know, for once, we're really going to be like singing the praises of the Charter Commission, right? As historically, I think this has been a problematic thing, and we've worked on this for, you know, a number of years to get to this point where I really have to give the Charter Commission a lot of credit for being open and looking at this and saying, you know what, this really matters. We have a lot of our charters. Yes, thank you. That's deserved, because this is something that it could be very, very meaningful if we're doing this in a bigger scale. So I put some examples. There are a lot of different ways that you can measure schools and how schools can measure themselves. So what I've put up here, a lot of us are doing internally. We're not being forced to do it. We're doing it internally because we want our schools to be quality. And in order to see if kids are learning and that we're having a quality product, we need to know where we land. So the things that are highlighted in yellow are things that the Charter Commission is now pulling in as examples that can be used on the alternative framework. Now, I will say right now for the Charter Commission, that alternative framework is only applicable to alternative schools. They have to meet that criteria. I'd love to see it applicable to our regular online schools as well, because as somebody mentioned, our online schools are like the alternative to the alternative to the alternative. And I think that's a really, really good point. And I bet if you looked at IC data, you would see that play out. And so this also applies to cohort grad rate. And I think this is where we need to look at that differently. I had 388 students graduate from iSucceed last year. But if you look on the school report card and you look at a cohort grad rate, it's going to look very low. And that, for me, is really problematic. I did joke with people from time to time and say, can we get a gold star for graduating those kids who have gone to 3 other schools prior to us and we made the difference? Because I think that deserves something. We're here for a reason. We're here. Our whole mission is to help kids graduate who have gone through lots of different things, whether it's other schools or things personally. We're there to help them when they need us. And this is more of what I think many of you guys are concerned about and what we need to work on constructively, is that a problem of low academic performance and a problem of low graduation rate, and especially when you're looking statewide, it is a statewide problem. It's not a one school problem. It's a problem all of us need to be a part of solving or trying to solve. And there are a lot of different reasons that contribute to it. But I list these are all our responsibilities together to do these things. I think as schools, I understand why school leaders it's been problematic having these accountability measures not matched up. But I also think there's a lot of things that we could be learning from our school leaders and what they actually are doing that are super meaningful that we can highlight. And I just want to highlight a sentence that I made a while ago in a presentation because it gets thrown around a lot. Unfortunately, what has happened with ESSA measures is where it's like a rank and file situation. And what many of them show is that your school is enrolling kids who are engaged, who are with you all 4 years, and who are high performing if those levels are high. If you're an alternative school, you're measuring the type of students that you have there. So I really want to highlight, we are not a low performing school. We are a school that serves students who have low performing issues or issues with performance. And we're trying to reach them, we're trying to bring them back in the fold, whether that's with us or if that's helping be a bridge to those students getting back into their traditional school. And I put our common demographics, and I very much have to concur with Professor Scaffidi's presentation about free and reduced lunch and income survey. We do not do direct certification at this time, and it's difficult. And it's gotten even more difficult because, as he said, most parents don't want to share income with entities like schools or governments. They have a high distrust. And so that information is really hard for us to get. But we know over the history of 10 years that range can be anywhere from 40 to 60%, and that's what we can verify. So we do have a lot of kids coming to us who have a certain poverty level or a certain cultural attribute that can impede their academics. We have a lot of adult students in my particular school because we are 7th through 12th, and we have an alternative school. We have a lot of things that are above the state average, and we're very mobile. So I did put this up here, and if you have a copy, I really, really highly recommend. You can go to the QR code, and those are testimonials we have of students and parents over the years. Part of being an online school means that you have to educate the public that you're here and that you provide a service, but also we are a statewide Title I school, so part of those requirements from the feds is that we are putting the word out that we have these services and what we're able to provide. We have a lot of interventions for engagement, and so those testimonials are really good ones. We've got students who have been in AVID with us. We've got students who have done dual credit. We have middle school students. We have some parents. We have some students with medical needs. I really encourage you guys to hear their stories because that's going to answer your question as to why we're around and how we're serving those kids. If you have some questions, let me know, but I know I'm going to join the panel, and I know that there are other online schools here that have similarities with this. And then the last page is resources, so there's other external resources you can see that are tied to alternative accountability.
With your juvenile correction experience, do you see that allowing foster children to now, I guess, obviously be enrolled in those, would that help in our juvenile corrections? Because obviously they're going to have a lot of issues being, taken from parents and stuff. And so have you seen, an enrollment in foster parents enrolling their children and maybe how that would help in that other situation in our juvenile corrections?
I say absolutely yes, and I say that in terms of any time we're engaging students in education, whether that is online or in person or anywhere, is statistically related to keeping them out of juvenile corrections. Education is the key in whatever form that is. Engagement is the key. For us, yeah, we have seen a slight increase. I think that in the past, because of that, the foster care situation wasn't fully called out. Often what you'd see is you'd see a guardian or somebody listed that you're like, oh, they don't really have the same name. There could be a lot of different structures there, but we're starting to see that called out. But absolutely, I think that becomes really important if you can give them some instruction where if they're going to be moved around a lot, especially during the school year, that they're still going to have the same thing. There's going to be a continuity. So absolutely, I think that's an important factor. Sure.
We're struggling with, I think, at least some of us in the legislature in our state. Should we be considering online as its own category? When we think about how we handle it, how we fund it, is it different enough at this point that we consider that?
I don't know if I have a quick answer to that. I think there are some advantages to that just because of the structure being so different. At the same time, the approach is very similar. And I think for us, so for example, like some of the things that we have to do, accountability-wise or report-wise or whatever, there's always this translation, right? So here's the traditional and here's our crosswalk to the online, right? We always have to cross off, what does that look like in online? So I don't know necessarily how to answer that as long as I think those components are similar, because those components are definitely important. The engagement's important, the curriculum's important, the instruction. So like those things would have to be packaged very similarly because we're offering similar things, just in a different format. So,
Can you say follow-up?
Yeah.
We're seeing the growth in, especially, we have districts that are running online programs, as we heard about today, and then we have the charter school part of the online. So there is this kind of dance in between, and they are a little different, in fact. So I guess from my perspective, I would appreciate some input from you all as to that approach, be it of value to Idaho students or not at this point to consider that.
I can speak a little bit to that. I know there's somebody right behind you who could probably speak on the district level. I think absolutely there is value to that. We've got different structures. I mean, like I said, we've been part of our charter authorized, and there's a lot of additional accountability for us, but we are also statewide. So we're a little more complex. But I'm gonna guess that our reasons for existing, our mission, are going to be pretty similar to why districts are opening onlines. They've got similar populations, but they may want to try and keep those kids within the community. So that's going to be what I've heard, at least, as far as like the motivation and the mission for that. I don't know if, Alex, if you can expand. Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
I would just add from my perspective at the district level, I think we do a couple things. I agree. I think we're serving a similar population. As a district, I think somebody mentioned it, I think it might have been Nancy, we are able to leverage some of those funds and support the district as a whole. So because we have an online school, we have a curriculum coach, we have instructional coaches that support both our brick and mortar schools and our online schools. So we're able to leverage some of those supports a little bit differently. There's a second part of the question that now is escaping me. But I do believe that everything Katie was talking about, like just using those unique measures, because we are supporting the kiddos. I know what I was going to say. Innovation, that's one of the big things we support in Idaho. So we partner with a lot of our brick and mortar districts, some of our neighboring districts that refer over to us. So they may not be in our district zone, but our neighboring districts, counselors, administrators are saying, hey, can you take these kiddos? They have unique needs. We have a big special education population within our school, and we have a pretty strong special education staff. So we are meeting a specific niche there. And I think allowing us to collaborate and be innovative and work with our neighboring school districts and really engage in that local control, because those districts are referring over to us and we're helping support them.
If I may, Senator Lynn, and I appreciate the question, to me, it's a matter of how our attitude and how what we think about online schools or virtual schools. So the problem we have is we can have a regular school district that has 15% proficiency and nobody says anything about it. But we have a virtual school that has 20% proficiency, they're low performing. And so it's our whole attitude and the way we refer to these online and virtual schools. At some point we have to realize that we're all in this for the same reason. And if we can't hold a virtual school to a different accountability than a district school, which typically has been the atmosphere. And that has to change for all of us in the industry, because these schools save kids' lives. And we have to acknowledge that and understand and realize they're as much in the best for kids as a district school is best for kids. And to me, we're all in the same group. Dividing it, I think, makes it even worse. Because then, that's why you're low performing, because you're in this group now, when you're referred to in the legislature or anywhere else in the industry. So I think it's an attitude thing.
We hear a lot of questions and statements about the attendance, the average daily attendance. How do you count that towards your budget structure versus a brick and mortar school? Do you work specifically with the families better to try to make sure when you have them for that short period of time that attendance is important?
Yes, and then I think we should, when we have the panel, maybe save that question for the different structures too. But in Idaho for online schools, that attendance is either coursework, progress in course, or seat time, so either one of those things. For us at iSucceed, we look at both of those things, but most of the time it's more accurate to look at progress in course, because those kids are moving through those courses on a flexible rate. So for example, one day they might not work in math at all, or maybe they don't work at all on Tuesday, but the next day they do, or they work over a weekend. So for us, we look at progress, what's our progress in the course per week? So we look at that, and then it breaks down by day. So that's how we do that as far as IC is concerned. As far as engagement, absolutely. Because if a student's not logging on, they're not learning. So we have to be very, very intentional with our interventions and our outreach and our communication. So you see a lot more communication by text, email, phone call. We do an in-person orientation, because a student's success in the online world is all about engagement. So we're trying to get them hooked in at a very early point in the term And then as they go through the term, and if they're struggling, that intervention and communication increases. So almost to a nagging point. But I think that in our world of technology, or in our world of disruption, those parents need that information. Those parents can see everything that a student is doing in the course, including their lack of engagement, which is super powerful.